So here's the threshold, right? And you can see it visually, below which no gain reduction kicks in, above which the gain reduction alert is triggered and gain reduction will occur after the release time, right? So we can see the threshold here. Very, very cool. And below the threshold is the knee. And we can see the knee. There you go. Looks like a leg with a knee. So hard knee goes directly into the gain reduction, and a soft knee, there's a softer knee there, is got a rounded shape into the gain reduction. And the cool thing is you can kind of do some in-between stuff and get it exactly right, which is very, very rare. Very, very few compressors have that. This is also super cool. This little headphone icon shows you can hear the portion of the signal that's being compressed. So if it was like a wet dry sort of thing, you could hear the wet signal, the compressed signal, and it's a very cool way to hear what's driving the compression. What part of the signal is being compressed is probably the better way of putting it. Here's the ratio. Goes from 1 to 1, which is no compression at all. Don't sit there for hours compressing at 1 to 1, because there is no compression at 1 to 1. And if you notice, look, this is super cool. From the first half of the dial is lots and lots of resolution in the light, ratio numbers, and then it goes up to 100. Like all that from 100 to 20, like these are the high ratios. There's very little resolution there because you're not subtly fine tuning it, but there's lots of resolution in the dial here in the light ratios, which allows you to really zero in on the light ratios and get a very light-handed compression. Cool design, right? Non-linear, super cool. The attack is here, and it's in seconds, milliseconds, but it's a very program-dependent compressor, this thing here. And I don't want anyone to get all mathematical with compression. It's funny. Reverbs, there's a little bit of math to reverb, but it never really works because the phrasing of the different elements and how that interacts with the compressor, you got to use your ears. I want everyone to sort of think about this as things are being fast, medium fast, and slow. And don't get hung up on the milliseconds because it's actually not all that helpful. Same with the release. Same thing here. Down. So we talked about the knee. Here's the range. And the range, again, I think the range, see how it defaults to all the way off in a sense? I think you want to set your compression with the range here, and then you can constrain it and dial it back. And we'll see how that works. Look ahead in dynamics is super, super cool. And they have some analog things that can sort of do it, but it is essentially a digital phenomenon. So you turn on look ahead here, and we'll see this a lot in the FabFilter stuff. What does look ahead do? Look ahead uses the latency in the program. And when I say the latency, in Logic, for example, if we go to audio preferences, see this buffer size here, this I/O buffer size? When you're mixing and mastering, you want this to be at the highest value, whether it's Cubase or Pro Tools or Logic or Ableton. When you're composing, you want the low values because you don't want the latency. When you play your keyboard, you want to hear the sound right away. But when you're mixing and mastering, you want to give your DAW and your computer all of the processing headroom you can have. And so we want this jacked up. Okay, so what does this do? When you hit spacebar and you're like, kick drum, are you ready? Snare, you ready? Bass, you ready? Compressor, you ready? Reverb, you ready? All right, play. You're giving the computer that buffer amount of time that I just showed you to get everybody all ready and dressed for school and out the door at the exact same time. And when I say at the exact same time, I mean sample accurate the same time. And that is no small thing when you're using third-party plugins that all have their own internal latency depending on the processing. So this is why we give the computer the maximum amount of time to get the job done. Now, with look ahead takes advantage of that buffer and can actually load the program material, the input signal, the snares, the kick, the vocal, whatever, into a buffer, and it can get in front of the transients in a way that analog can. And you can trick stuff, and you can there's all good, really cool old analog tricks where you could have a ghost kick, you can have a ghost track and then slide it earlier to make compression or gates open up on time. But we don't need to do any of that here. We can use the look ahead, which is so cool. So as you push the look ahead, you turn it on here, as you slide the look ahead forward, you can get in front of that snare hit. You can get in front of that kick, and you can get in front of that guitar pick. Now, more is not better, contrary to American thinking. More is not always better. The right amount is the right amount. If you want for a kick to kick hard, and you want that initial transient to have a smack to it, you don't want to get in front of it, right? That would sort of tame it too much. So on kicks and snares that you want to have the initial transient really have a snap to it, you might try a tiny bit of look ahead or none. However, if you were dealing with a certain amount of using this as a ducking compressor, you might want that look ahead to see the transient that's triggering it and get there early and pull down ahead of time, and it might sound cleaner. So use this creatively. More is not better, but be aware of it, and it does certainly come in handy. And you can even see visually, as we look at the gain reduction visually here, you can see the compressor getting in front of the transient, which is really, really cool. Here's the hold, which we said smooths out from things releasing too quickly. And here we have a wet gain and a wet pan, and the outer pan can do some mid-side balancing, which can, as we get a little bit more advanced this month, we'll end it a little bit more. We'll have some more kicked up tricks to come with some mid-side stuff. The dry gain is turned all the way down, but we can do parallel compression, right? And parallel compression, as we know, is to over-compress something on purpose to get all of the little details of these little sounds that are getting masked by these bigger percussive moments, and then blending in some of that detail with the uncompressed signal. And it's great on vocals. It's great on lots of stuff. It adds lots of detail, but then you still have the dynamics. So we can play with those as well. And then the dry pan also has a mid-side balancing. Oversampling. You always want this on if your computer can take it. There's no, unlike look ahead, which sometimes may not be desirable, oversampling is never not desirable as long as it doesn't make your computer cry. And what oversampling does is it internally upsamples so that it can do more high resolution work and not distort and create aliasing. We know when analog distorts, it distorts relative to the key of the song. And it distorts in musical intervals like fifths and fourths and octaves and stuff. When digital distorts, it distorts as a function of the sample rate, and it can't quantize things quickly enough, and the quantization errors make it put in fundamentals that are unrelated to the key of the song, and they sound horrible. So this minimizes aliasing, which is the injection into your signal of non-musically related harmonics that are yucky. So keep that cranked up. If you can't afford 4 times, do 2 times, but always turn that on if you can stand it. And then over here, sneaky hiding is a little gain structure balancing thing with it. You can adjust the input level, the output level, and balance the left-right input level and balance the left-right output level. And then finally, you have this cool bypass. This is the good bypass to use because it doesn't make your computer hiccup because of the way it deals with the buffering. Sometimes I think everyone will find when you bypass from here, it can make the computer hiccup, kind of spaz out on you and throw things out of time, and you don't get as clean of an A-Bing. So if you're really on top of your game, you're going to A-B here, right? It's buffer free. You get a clean bypass. And then finally, almost finally, is this little slider here. And this is a cool wet dry mixer for a compressor. So you can compress it and then do a little bit of parallel compression right here, blending the compressed and the uncompressed. And you can also sort of hyper compress it and go up to 200% and make it even more compressed. When you're setting this thing, keep this at 100, but then you can modify a little bit and it can be actually quite helpful. The metering is here. You can go super zoomed in or zoomed out. I think for the most part, 9 dB is the best place to start. If you're doing 10 dB of gain reduction, that's a lot, you know. And usually you want to do something more subtle, so you want to see better, so you do it like that.